Coming live from the studio, this is All Sports with Gerardo. Thank you for watching another episode of All Sports. This is your host Gerardo, and all I talk is sports. On the show today, I am going to talk about the coronavirus, NFL football, and college football. Before I start the show, I hope you all had a great week. To start off, this is the 100th episode of All Sports with Gerardo. I want to say thank you to everybody that tunes in every week, and I want to say thank you to everybody that views my videos and my content on my social media pages at All Sports with Gerardo. This is not the end of All Sports with Gerardo, and there will be many more episodes going into the future. Once again, for everybody that has tuned in since day one, even for people that haven't been tuning in since day one, but they started tuning in sometime in the last few months or in the last year or two, for everyone that has tuned in to All Sports with Gerardo, I want to say thank you for tuning in if you tune in every week, and I also want to say thank you to everybody that has viewed my content on my social media pages at All Sports with Gerardo and on mymentmedia.com. Also, in the next few weeks, All Sports with Gerardo will be approaching the 2-year anniversary. And since I started All Sports with Gerardo up until now, from the time that I have been a part of Ment Media, I have produced 100 episodes. This is the 100th episode, and I'm going to continue producing episodes for Ment Media. So episode 100 is not the end. I'm planning on going to episode 150. I'm even going to try to get to episode 200 if I can. Also, since I've started All Sports with Gerardo, I have produced over 150 videos. This is not the end. I'm going to continue producing videos, and I want to get over 200 videos and even 250 videos. I want to produce over 200 videos sometime in the next few months. So this is not the end of All Sports with Gerardo, and it's going to continue going into the next few months, going into next year, and going into the following year. And once I graduate from college, it's not going to be the end. I'm going to continue doing All Sports with Gerardo, even though it might look a little bit different. Now that it's been almost 2 years since I have started All Sports with Gerardo, a lot has changed, especially since I have started All Sports with Gerardo. And even for your host Gerardo, a lot has changed. Every week that I have done All Sports with Gerardo, from the very beginning up until now, for almost the last 2 years. So this is the 100th episode, and in the next few weeks, it will be the 2-year anniversary since I started All Sports with Gerardo. Once again, I want to say thank you to everybody that tunes in to All Sports with Gerardo on a weekly basis. Don't stop tuning in. This is not the end of All Sports with Gerardo. It's going to continue going into the next few months and even going into the next few years. I'm just glad that I was able to reach my milestone of producing 100 episodes since I have been a part of Ment Media. Now, for the 100th episode, my plan wasn't to be in this studio, and a few weeks ago likely would have been the 100th episode, but because of the circumstance, I am just glad that I have finally been able to reach the 100th episode, and that I can continue producing All Sports with Gerardo, even though it's from a different studio. I didn't have all this planned out of how I wanted my 100th episode to go, but I'm just glad that I was able to produce the 100th episode of All Sports with Gerardo, even though it wasn't from the Tivoli Met Radio studio on the Rary campus. But I'm hoping that sometime in the next few weeks, I can get back into the Tivoli Met Radio studio on the Rary campus and continue doing All Sports with Gerardo from that studio. But until then, I will continue doing All Sports with Gerardo from this studio. Now that All Sports with Gerardo has reached the 100th episode, and now that I have produced over 150 videos for All Sports with Gerardo, 2 years after I started doing All Sports with Gerardo, All Sports with Gerardo is going to continue. And this is not the end of All Sports with Gerardo. And my goal is to double the amount of episodes and videos that I have created up until this point. And if you haven't, make sure to follow All Sports with Gerardo on my social media pages on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Make sure to follow All Sports with Gerardo on mymentmedia.com. And also, make sure to tune in to All Sports with Gerardo on a weekly basis. Moving on now to the coronavirus, the return of sports. We have started to see the return of sports here in the US and in other countries around the world. In this episode of All Sports with Gerardo, I am going to focus on the return of sports here in the US. So far here in the US, we have seen NASCAR, UFC, and PGA Golf return. Hopefully this summer, we will see other sporting events and leagues resume or start their season. Later on this year, we should also see more sporting events and other leagues start their season. So far, here in the US, we have just seen sporting events come back. We haven't seen any leagues come back here in the US like we've seen other leagues come back in other countries around the world. Also, sporting events have also come back in other countries around the world. But so far here in the US, it has only been sporting events up until now. But in July, that's when we're going to see leagues come back here in the US. Especially our major sports leagues here in the US are going to start or resume their season. So we all can't wait for July, especially towards the end of July, when we get our major sports leagues either resuming their season or starting their season. So we all got July, but especially certain dates marked on our calendars for when leagues are going to resume or start their season. So we all can't wait for that. So far, with the sporting events that we have seen return back here in the US, only NASCAR, for one of their events, has allowed fans into the stadium, which wasn't that many fans. But in other countries around the world, with certain leagues or sporting events, we have not seen fans allowed into the stadiums or the arenas. So far here in the US, we have only seen fans at this single NASCAR event, which it was only a few hundred fans. And we're going to have to wait and see going into the next few weeks, especially when the leagues either start or resume their season, if fans will be allowed into the stadiums or the arenas. It's going to be interesting to see, especially here in the US, when fans will be allowed back into stadiums or arenas. And even in other countries around the world, with other leagues and sporting events that have made a comeback, when are fans going to be allowed into their stadiums or arenas? That is the million-dollar question that has to be answered. And at some point going into the next few months, We're going to have to wait and see when leagues and sporting events around the world start letting fans back into their stadiums or arenas. But when these leagues or sporting events, no matter who they are or where it is, anywhere around the world, when they allow fans back into their stadium or arena, don't expect a full capacity. It's likely going to be a capacity that is only half of a stadium or arena full, or even less than half. So when fans are allowed to go back into stadiums or arenas, no matter what league or sporting event it is around the world, don't expect a full capacity at that stadium or arena. It's likely going to be a 50% capacity or even less than 50%. We're just going to have to wait and see when fans are allowed back into stadiums or arenas. Now, with the return of sports happening around the world and now happening here in the US, July is going to be the month that you're going to want circled on your calendar. July will be the month here in the US that we will see leagues either start or resume their season. So far here in the US, we have only seen sporting events return. But going into the next few weeks, now that it's the summertime, we're going to see leagues return back here in the US, just like we've seen leagues return back in other countries around the world. So if we take a look at the NFL, with the status of the NFL, it's still the same, just like it's been for the last few weeks. All 32 teams are hoping that they can start training camp on time when it's the date to report to training camp. Also, the NFL is hoping that there will be a 2020 season, but also a season that will start on time. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens going into the next few weeks. But as of right now, all 32 teams are basically waiting on the NFL to make the decisions as to when teams will be allowed back to their team facilities. So far, only coaching staff has been allowed back to the team facilities. Players haven't been allowed back. And when players are allowed back to the team facilities, it will likely be when it's time for training camp to begin. But is training camp going to start on time, or is it going to be delayed? We're going to have to wait and see. Will the 2020 season start on time or be delayed? We're going to have to wait and see. Is the 2020 season going to have to be formatted and look different? We're going to have to wait and see. It's all going to come down to the coronavirus pandemic. And right now, for the foreseeable future, no matter what league or sporting event it is around the world, with everything that's going on with the coronavirus pandemic, nothing is a guarantee, and anything can change. Even if you make a schedule, that schedule can change because of what's going on right now. So we're just going to have to wait and see what happens, especially with the NFL. But all 32 teams are basically waiting on the NFL to get their answers as to when the 2020 season will begin. But when teams will be allowed back to their team facilities, especially players, and will training camps start on time, and will there be a 2020 season that starts on time, or is it going to be delayed or be formatted different? We're just going to have to wait and see what happens in the next few weeks. Now, if we take a look at Major League Baseball, for the last few weeks, they have been doing everything they can to have a 2020 season. Now, for Major League Baseball, the clock is ticking now that we're in June. And if Major League Baseball keeps waiting and delaying for there to be a 2020 season, there will be a chance there may not be a 2020 season. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens in Major League Baseball. But for the last few weeks, they've been throwing different proposals on the table with the amount of games that would be played, the type of season that would be played, the format of the season, how much individuals will get paid, especially players. For the last few weeks, all kinds of different proposals have been thrown on the table, and they've all changed, and both sides have not been able to agree to the proposal that has been thrown on the table. But just recently, has there been a new proposal thrown on the table? And we're going to have to wait and see if this proposal gets approved, and if both sides can agree to it, and this proposal especially gets approved, there's a chance there will be a 2020 Major League Baseball season. And if there is a season, there's no doubt that it's going to be completely different and formatted and played differently compared to previous seasons from the past. We're just going to have to wait and see if there will be a 2020 Major League Baseball season. But Major League Baseball cannot keep delaying the start of the 2020 season if they do have a 2020 season, because the clock is ticking now that we're in June. And if there would be a 2020 season, it would likely start in July, and they can't keep postponing the start of the 2020 season because Major League Baseball has already said they will not play into late fall, and they're definitely not going to play in the winter. So hopefully there will be a 2020 season. There is a 50-50 chance there will be a season. We're just going to have to wait and see what happens. Now, taking a look at the NBA. The NBA is supposed to resume their season at the end of July down in Orlando. And individual players for the next few days and for the last few days have the option, if they want to go down and resume and play the rest of the 2019-2020 season in Orlando, or are they going to sit out the rest of this season and wait for the 2020-2021 season to begin later on this year? The teams that are going down to Orlando to finish the 2019-2020 season, the individual players from those teams have the option if they want to play the rest of this season or sit out the rest of this season. But in the next few days, they have to let the NBA know. And regardless of what their decision is, if they want to play the rest of the season or if they're going to sit out the rest of the season, the NBA is not going to punish individual players that want to sit out the rest of the season. All the NBA is asking is that individual players notify them if they are going to sit out this season and wait for next season to begin later on this year. We're just going to have to wait and see if there are individual players that say they are going to sit out the rest of the season and wait until the next season begins. Also, we're going to have to wait and see if the NBA will be able to accomplish resuming the 2019-2020 season down in Orlando at the end of July. But so far, it is looking like the NBA will resume and finish the 2019-2020 season going into the next few months. And then later on this year, the 2020-2021 season will begin. And there's no doubt that the way the 2019-2020 season is going to finish and how the off season is going to play out, and when the 2020-2021 season begins, there's no doubt that these next few months for the NBA, regardless if they're finishing this season or starting next season, is going to look completely different compared to seasons from the past. Now, taking a look at the NHL. The NHL is in Phase 2. And they're working their way to Phase 4 to resume the 2019-2020 season later on this summer. And as of right now for the NHL, they're having the talks and the conversations of which two cities will be the two host cities to finish the 2019-2020 season. We're going to have to wait and see what two cities the NHL picks so the NHL can finish the 2019-2020 season and then move on to the 2020-2021 season later on this year. Also, we're going to have to wait and see if the NHL can get to Phase 3 and Phase 4. When is this season going to resume later on this summer? And what two cities will be the host cities for the NHL to finish the 2019-2020 season? We're going to have to wait and see what the NHL's announcements are in regards to the host cities and when the 2019-2020 season will begin and finish. Also, we're going to have to wait and see, now that the NHL passed Phase 1, they're in Phase 2, if the NHL can get to Phase 3 and Phase 4. So as of right now, that is the current update for the return of sports here in the US and for the major sports leagues here in the US. But as of right now, everybody has their calendars marked for July, because that's when leagues like the NBA and the NHL are supposed to resume the 2019-2020 season. Major League Baseball is supposed to start the 2020 season. Major League Soccer is supposed to resume the 2020 season. Also, the NFL should be starting the 2020 season with training camp. So as of right now, everyone's looking forward to July, because that's when leagues are going to make their return here to the US, regardless if they're starting their season or resuming their season. But everybody can't wait for July, regardless of what league it is that's able to either start or resume their season here in the US. But as of right now, no matter what country it is around the world, everyone's glad that sports has made a comeback. In other countries around the world, we have seen leagues and sporting events return. Here in the US, we have only seen sporting events return. But in July, that's when leagues are going to return, and everyone can't wait for leagues to return here in the US, regardless of what league or sporting event it is here in the US or around the world. But everyone is just glad that sports has finally returned now that we are in June. Moving on now to NFL football. Head coach Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers have agreed to a new 6-year contract extension that replaces the 3 years he had left remaining on his current contract with the 49ers. The new contract makes Kyle Shanahan one of the NFL's top 5 highest paid head coaches. The NFL announced Las Vegas will host the 2021 NFL Pro Bowl at Allegiant Stadium. So there's no doubt that Las Vegas is looking forward to the Raiders and to the NFL in Las Vegas. Now Las Vegas has an NHL team, the Golden Knights. But now, this year, Las Vegas is going to have an NFL team, the Las Vegas Raiders. Also, with the Raiders relocating from Oakland to Las Vegas, the Raiders are looking forward to relocating to Las Vegas and starting a new chapter of Raiders football. But they're also looking forward to getting a new stadium, which will be Allegiant Stadium. And the city of Las Vegas can't wait for the Raiders and for the NFL. But the Raiders can't wait to start a new chapter of Raiders football and to play in a new stadium. With Las Vegas being the entertainment capital of the world, Las Vegas is looking forward to NFL football being in Las Vegas, and they're looking forward to the Las Vegas Raiders being in Las Vegas. And there's no doubt that Las Vegas is excited for the Raiders, and the Raiders are excited to be in Las Vegas. And there's no doubt that going into the future, Allegiant Stadium, which is the home of the Las Vegas Raiders, is going to host many different types of events and sporting events. And they're also going to host different types of NFL events, like the Super Bowl, the Pro Bowl, possibly the NFL Draft, or other events. Even though Las Vegas could not host the 2020 NFL Draft because of the coronavirus pandemic, Las Vegas will host the 2022 NFL Draft. Las Vegas is going to host the 2021 NFL Pro Bowl. And sometime going into the future, Las Vegas will host a Super Bowl, and they're going to host other NFL events. But also, Las Vegas and Allegiant Stadium is going to host many different types of sporting events and other events on a yearly basis. So Las Vegas is looking forward to a new chapter with Allegiant Stadium, having an NFL team, and having the Raiders in Las Vegas. And the Raiders, they're looking forward to Las Vegas, and they're looking forward to starting a new chapter of Raiders football. And it all begins in 2020. And both Las Vegas and the Raiders are looking forward to a new chapter. Moving on now to college football, Reggie Bush has been officially reinstated by USC. Reggie Bush was one of the most electrifying players that college football has ever seen. During Reggie Bush's career at USC, he had 1,331 all-purpose yards as a freshman, which was a USC record. He led NCAA with 222.3 all-purpose yards per game in 2005. He set the Pac-10 record for all-purpose yards in a game. He had the most combined rushing yards by a USC player in consecutive games, and he was the 17th player in NCAA history with 2 seasons of 2,000 plus all-purpose yards. Moving on now to the show, what to watch for, the return of sports here in the US and around the world. Moving on now, on the next show, I will talk about the coronavirus, Major League Baseball, and boxing. I hope you all have a great week. Tune in to the next All Sports with Gerardo show next week. I want to say thank you to everybody that listens to All Sports. Subscribe or like my pages on social media at All Sports with Gerardo. Until next time, this is Gerardo.